Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rutch.
And I'm Spoon Phillips.
And today's episode is brought to you by, listen to this title, the Martin Custom Shop OM Size 28 style with Engelmann spruce top and abalone rosette guitar. In other words, this is our clone, so to speak, of the original Martin OM 28 John Mayer. In light of his ever-expanding reputation and fan base, Martin collaborated with John Mayer on the creation of a second namesake guitar, the OMJM John Mayer. That is not what this is. The guitar we're talking about today, minus the signature, minus some very cool aluminum appointments, this guitar recreates the original OM28 John Mayer, and it's a whole lot more affordable. For more information on this great limited edition guitar available only at Maury's Music, please visit maurysmusic.com today. Spoon, have you caught up on your sleep yet? I have not.
No, not at all. And, you almost forget what it's like, but it's totally worth it. And, of course, our listening audience needs to know why we are so sleep-deprived.
I'm sorry, what was that? We're talking about the Martinfest hangover, and I don't know if I could speak for you, but it's not even alcohol related. We are fresh off of one of the most fun, I'll say it anyway, most fun Martinfests. 2023 just wrapped a few days ago. We're taping this in the middle of the week, coming off of a beautiful acoustic high. You were there Thursday, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I was smart enough to just go Friday through Monday, and I'm a little bit more rested than you. But I think today we want to talk about the 2023 Martinfest recap. And boy, it's going to be a tall order, but can we keep this under an hour?
Oh, I think so, because we'll probably both nod off. No, seriously, for those who are not familiar with the Martinfest, this is a gathering of members of the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum online. The very first one took place in August of 2022. I'm sorry, August of 2002. And we had to skip one due to the pandemic emergency, but this was the 21st Martinfest. And it takes place in and around Nazareth, Pennsylvania, where they make Martin guitars. The hotel that we go to is actually technically in Bethlehem. And basically, very quickly, the modern-day version is a little more complicated than it started out. When it really started out, the first time, it was really people going to the factory on a Monday to tour the Martin factory, which for many of us was our first tour. And we met, some of us met the day before in Borough Park, which is just basically around the corner and down the street from the Martin factory. And we met in a little log cabin that's up on the hill in the park there. And then the next day after the factory, we went back to the park to a basically picnic pavilion and had a small open mic and basically just got to share some time with getting to know people and playing each other's guitars. These days, the first official day is on Friday at Borough Park. At the largest of the pavilions. The second day, we have a street fair in downtown Nazareth called Martin on Main that is put on by the Nazareth Chamber of Commerce and the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum. Then Martin Guitar has a booth there, and people from Martin Guitar are there, but it's actually a UMGF and the City of Nazareth event. The third day, we're back at the park again. And in between are quite literally all-night parties at the hotel with 4 public rooms available to us in addition to things that sometimes go on in private rooms. And like you said, this year I got there Thursday, but traffic had delayed me, and the person that I was meeting that was flying in from Phoenix had a 4-hour weather delay. And then maybe go into a little bit of that later, but we didn't get to the hotel until after 11, and so we were only up until about 2:15 that night. And we were literally going to go to bed because we were both exhausted when there was a knock at the door and somebody saying, "I hear voices in there." And and it turned out to be a fellow named Jim Fortmuller, who's only been recently to Martinfest, but he's heard about him for many, many years, and a former coworker of mine. And he's the perfect kind of person to be at Martinfest. So he was there with a friendly beer and some conversation with me and the guy that I was sharing a room with that had come in from Arizona. That was the extent of my Thursday night. There were other people there. And there's even what they call the early birds that arrive on Wednesday night, though I'm not sure who those were this year. Most of the early birds, unfortunately, the people who typically were early birds, couldn't come this year for one personal reason or another, which is too bad. So, and then I stayed actually until Tuesday because the guy who I was meeting, Kirby Statler, from Phoenix, it was like $600 cheaper for him to fly out on Tuesday rather than Monday. So there, I got a bonus day in there, as did a few other people, but I'm jumping very ahead of myself. So Kirby was saying he was trying to explain to the woman on the plane with him, and she said, "You mean people who play the guitar come from all over to sit in a park and play guitar?" And she didn't quite understand why it would take that many days and why people would go to the expense to do this year after year after year after year. And yet, well, I've told the story before too of the very first Martinfest where we first met. I'd maybe like to hear your side, your version of that.
Well, yeah, the very first one, you set the table really well there. It basically was a very Martin-centric thing where people want to come out and tour the Martin factory, and we sandwiched it with a little bit of time at the park, the day before and then the day after, or the time after the day at Martin. But it was really interesting because going back in time and you younger kids that are like thinking about everything is the internet, what's so strange, put yourself in our position. This is 2002. We've known each other from just reading what we type and put on in print. It wasn't even avatars or anything like social media these days with Instagram and Facebook. It was, Spoon was what he wrote. David was what he wrote. You knew people from their diary almost. It was a journal that we kept following. So we get there and of course we can waste a lot of time going into the weeds on who we met and when, but one of the first people that Spoon met was the first person I met. Set the stage where I'm walking up this grassy hill at the log cabin and I'm meeting a guy named Mikey Buno, and we became fast friends. And I said, "Hey, nice guitar." Of course, we all said that the whole weekend because we all love these Martins, and we became fast friends. He told us later that he and his wife Diane literally got to this, pavilion thinking, let's see what goes on. Maybe we won't get chopped up into a million pieces and murdered by a bunch of these strangers. Maybe we won't. And it probably everybody's got a different timeline of when they began feeling comfortable. I innocently became comfortable immediately, and that's not really self-awareness. I mean, I probably should have been a little bit cautious of walking into a situation with everybody I didn't know, but it quickly grew from, do I trust these people, to, boy, I can't wait till tomorrow, and then as soon as that was over, I can't wait till next year. So it was a real life-changing thing for me. This is, to put it in perspective, this was more than a year before Lori and I became a store. So I was there as a player and I got to know the people on the forum digitally, for about a year or less than a year. And then the first gathering happened. So it was really interesting and very, very fulfilling to put a name, not a name with a face, put a name with the words they always typed. And it wasn't I think maybe 85 or 80 people were at the first one. And it certainly blossomed into something a lot bigger. As years went by, it snowballed and got, I won't say bigger and better, but at least bigger. But yeah, that first year, I could probably speak for a lot of people when I say I bet you almost everybody who left that was very happy they were there and couldn't wait to bring a friend next time. I could count on probably one hand the number of people that were at the first Martinfest and didn't find a reason to go to a second one. It was extremely successful in almost a unanimous regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I came there with Tony Phillips, who I had only recently met. I guess they were talking August. We would have met in February probably of that year. And because I was looking for people to go see Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young at the Garden and couldn't find a single ticket. So that's how he and I met. But we had, kind of knew each other on the forum. There's all those different people on the forum. It's hard to keep everybody straight at that time. So we had met in town a couple of times, or maybe more than a couple of times by the time Martinfest came around. So, and we didn't even have a name for it then. And so we went there, and it was 99 degrees. So we actually stopped at the Pizza Hut for a pizza and a pitcher of beer before coming over the hill to the park, which we regretted immediately once we saw how cool it was and all these people there. So, and quite honestly, we get into the parking lot and we head over toward the cabin where you're obviously there, and I literally hear somebody sing the line, "Pulled into Nazareth feeling half past dead." And so they just started playing the Wait when I came up, and on the porch was a small circle of about maybe 4 people playing. That included you and Dick Boak of Martin, who I had recognized, but I'd never met him before. I'd spoken to him on the phone, but I'd never seen him in person before. And so there was there was not, I think you're overestimating when you say there are 80 people. I'd be surprised if there were that many people. Maybe by the second day, because a lot of people only came in for the tour, but there certainly weren't 80 people at the cabin. And, but of course the intelligent ones all stayed at the hotel. But, and had an all-night thing at the hotel. But local people like Maury didn't think like they needed to do that because they could just drive there. And so they missed a really good time in the little lounge in those days in the hotel we were at then. It was an actual cocktail bar. So you actually had a bartender and all that. That only lasted, I think, 1 year. By the time we went back the second year, they no longer had a bar there, and they had turned it into just a lounge. But so that was the first year. And Maury and I actually really met on the tour directly after the tour. But we've come a long way since then, and so has Martin Guitar. The whole visitor center they have there now and stuff wasn't even there, and I think the UMGF and Martin those what had started being called NazFest, and then we decided to start calling it Martinfest to have Martin in the title, may have inspired Chris Martin to do expand the museum and the visitor center, because we started coming there, and each year would be more and more of us. And then they started, they would have press conferences with us. They basically, Mr. Martin come out and address us. They gave us special tours. This was all before they had the Martin Owners Club, and they kind of used us as a focus group before coming up with their own idea of the Martin's Owners Club. So anyway, that's going back 22 years ago to the very first Martinfest. This year was the 21st. It was a little odd last year coming off of the pandemic, and it was smaller crowd last year than normal. This year was also still smaller because so many regulars had other things. Normally it's in August. This was the last weekend of July, so it didn't work out with everybody's schedule. But we had a spectacular time, nonetheless. And so I had come up with something that I put on the forum in the section about Martinfest that I was going to ask Maury to think about and go through. And what it is a recap of certain specific questions. But before I get to that, I had also recommended that we do our 20 questions game, where Maury would be thinking of a guitar and I would try to guess what it was. I suggested a Martinfest special, where instead of focusing specifically on Martins that are available today in the Martin catalog, we're going to each pick a guitar that was at Martinfest that we found particularly memorable, and maybe do one earlier and one later, but in the program. But maybe it might be a good idea to do that now and get that out of the way. What do you think? Start with a 20 questions?
I would agree, because we say things like that, and then it's 45 minutes into the show. We quickly do the 20 questions and say one more thing, and we're out of here. So I'll vote to do at least one round of it right now.
Okay, so why don't you think of, because it's my turn to guess, technically. So why don't, just to remind people, last time Maury was able to guess the guitar that I was thinking of before we got through the 20 questions. So basically, he's going to think of a guitar that stood out to him at Martinfest, and I get 20 questions to try to figure out what it is, and up to 3 of those questions can be a guess of the model. So let me know when Swami has a thinking cap on and has a guitar in mind.
If you listen really closely, I'm going to a specs page. on maurysmusic.com. And 20 questions on the clock. Go.
Is this guitar made of rosewood?
No.
That's 1. Is this guitar a dreadnought?
No.
That's 2. Is this guitar made in Nazareth, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Is this guitar in the standard series?
No.
That's 4. Then I'll have to go to, is this guitar in the Modern Deluxe series?
No.
Is it the GPC 16E?
No.
Okay, that's 6.
Was that at Martinfest?
Yeah, it was at the pavilion. It was at the Martin booth. And I thought maybe you were trying to sneak one in on me. That was up at the Martin booth at Martin on Main.
We can use them too. Okay. Well, I'm glad I know that before you ask me. Okay. Oh, I didn't see all those. I was with Mike with our ice cream giveaway, and I didn't see every guitar there.
Yeah, you were up there. You got Mike the ice cream and all that. So, but I understand when you get brain freeze from ice cream, you can't always pay attention to things. But okay, I only have 6 questions, so this is going to get interesting. So you looked up the specs, so that saves me a question. And so let's see here. Does this guitar have a spruce top?
No.
That's 7. Is this guitar the CEO 9?
Yes.
Ding, 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 ding. 8 questions. 8 questions.
I thought I would trick you because this guitar was only there one day.
That's correct. However, I was in the song circle when the fair Rosalind, that's her internet name is Rosalind, was there with her CEO 9, and another person who owns a CEO 9 but didn't have it there was playing her guitar. So, whew. Okay, we'll come back to my 20 questions in a little bit.
Congratulations, that was good. And thank you, Rosalind, for bringing that guitar.
So on Friday, there was this relatively small group there. It's kind of a meet and greet thing, and they have an open mic. And this year, longtime UMGF and Martinfest regular Brian Murphy, who is old acoustic player on the forum, donated his, volunteered to bring his sound PA system and run it for all of us. So that was very nice of him. And then we got to, hang out and, yeah, absolutely. Great job, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so people, signed up and played some music. People got to see each other's guitars. And you can often tell the veterans, because we're not as eager to say, oh, let me see that. Can I see that guitar? Because we're so used to doing this and have seen so many Martin guitars. Unlike the new people who most of them have never been around that many Martins. And many of them have never seen a pre-war Martin. And there weren't that many this year. Bob Hamilton.
Pick a herringbone?
Pick a herringbone, thank you. Because he owns many herringbone Martins from the pre-war era. But he had one of my favorite guitars that I'll talk about more in detail later. That is long scale 0028 from 1934, and that's in my memorable notations that I put on the forum. That was one of them. But that was there that day, and but there were others, but really it's about, for a lot of it's like a family reunion now, because there's a lot of people we only see at Martinfest or rarely see otherwise, and if they're in our general area. And so it's very much about the people as much or more as the guitars and music now for those of us who have been doing this for so long. And there were people who have not been able to come to Martinfest for a very long time that were there. And so that was, very, very cool to see. And you don't have to just bring a Martin. Bill Koonsman, who's been a regular going all the way back to the very first Martinfest, has not always been able to come, but he was there this year with his wife Amy, and he had this adorable little Yamaha sort of parlor guitar. It was a small, extra short scale, might have had a full short scale, but a smaller slope shoulder shaped body, but a 14-fret guitar that he was playing, but he also brought his mandolin. And he didn't bring his fiddle this year, but multi-instrumentalist that is really good at jamming with people and just being able to, pick up a song very quickly if somebody else is playing and add a lot to it. So they were there on Friday. That was very cool for me. And so was seeing a new fella that was there last year. He stopped by stopped by Friday last year with a little pre-war Martin that he had just bought from John Hall, one of our longtime members, who was a luthier and expert vintage Martin repairman. And he also knew that Lawrence Juber was going to be there, so he wanted to meet Lawrence Juber and show him the guitar. And then he showed it to me. And then I basically welcomed him in. His name was John Galella. He's from New Jersey, and invited him to come out to the hotel. And he did do that. He came out to the hotel. He had a wonderful time. He was still kind of shy about playing and stuff. But this year, he also came for Friday, came out to the hotel, and showed up on Saturday to see the events. But he and then came back to the hotel, and he wasn't going to, but then he did, and we had a great time. So it was great to see him. And at the end of that day on Friday, for me, Bill Koonsman was over there playing music with him and had got him to kind of open up, and he played an original song for us. It was the last thing I did on Friday at the park, was hear an original song by John Galella called "The Road Less Traveled," that I would say is something that you could have heard from John Denver or America or Graham Nash. It was one of those kind of upbeat, good feeling songs about taking the road less traveled, I requested that he do it that night or the next night rather, in a song circle. And it was a big hit, went over very big, and he did some other original music. So that was a big treat for me. You got to there on Friday at about what time?
Probably close to noon. I ended up going right to the pavilion. I had the luxury of renting a room, but it wasn't going to be ready until 3 p.m. So I got to decide, do I want to leave my guitars in the oven with wheels from 12 o'clock until 3, or do I want to go to the hotel first, drop everything off at the desk, and, leave my D45 with the desk clerk, or just bring them right to the pavilion? So I got there bright and early, and I was really excited to bump into Craig Mahan. Was the first guy I met. And to back up just 10 minutes, honorable mention, Brian Murphy did a great job providing all the sound, but before he was even there, Craig had done the same thing, albeit he only had one speaker that had a built-in mixer. So if we're giving credit where credit's due, if we didn't need extra channels...
I did not know that. And that's where I was wondering why we had that extra speaker there. I didn't know that's what that was all about.
Yep, he was willing to do exactly what Brian did Friday and Sunday, but his speaker didn't have enough inputs, and we kind of decided really quickly, hey, if anybody comes up to do up a mic and they want to do something with another person and you need 2 microphones and 2 guitars, it's not going to work with this little setup. But hats off to Craig, as he was willing to do it. And I want to say hello to him because he's a good local friend. He's not that far from me, and we've actually bumped into each other at some of my gigs. So thank you, Craig, for what would have worked great. If you would just go and buy a lot more gear, you can do it for us next year. But he was the first person I met up with when I first got there. Bill and Amy Koonsman came shortly after, and it was one of those days where the temperature climbed from 97 to 98 to 99, and by the time 2:30 or 3 p.m. came, it was turning into being a pretty good crowd, and I was on my last tank of air because it was I was there too early is the moral of the story. So I didn't get to stay probably past 3:30 or 4 p.m. I should have got there at 3 p.m. and stayed as late as everyone else did, but it was really nice. I got back to the hotel in time to, take my guitars out of the oven and cool down a little bit. But I remember last year I made the attempt to get to the pavilion a lot earlier, and the opposite happened. I got there too late. So the moral of this whole podcast is no matter what you do, how much you try to get to Martinfest, where you try to be, There's always something you're missing. You always try to jam with some people that you think you're going to have time and you don't. But Friday at noon was when I first got there, and before I blinked, it was Monday at breakfast, and I thought, wow, that went too fast.
Well, I do want to, well, that's for sure. I want to warn our listeners, if you've never been to Martinfest and you've ever thought about it, that this won't be your only Martinfest. There were so many people who were at their very first Martinfest that heard a lot about it. And inordinate number of the new people that, they're called green dots because they get a green dot on their name tag so everybody knows they're new and everybody makes them especially welcome. An inordinate number of green dots were there specifically because of Maury Rutch, because of these podcasts, because of his internet shows, and that have been following him online and have heard so much about it they had to come. And every single one of them said they're coming back next year, if they possibly can. So I had made up this little thing to put on the forum. To ask people about the Martinfest experience, and it basically says, and so I'm going to run Maury through this right now. It says, please share up to 3 answers to the following. Memorable music, that's 1. 2 is great guitars. 3 is I'm glad I... ... 4 is I'm sorry I didn't... ... 5 is poignant moments. And 10, had to be there moments. So let's do memorable music. Why don't you give me 1 or 2 or 3 memorable music events or moments or songs or performances that stuck out to you?
If I don't mention your song or your name here, it doesn't mean it didn't make an impression on me, but I've got it's like...
And you can send your complaints to support@maurysmusic.com.
It's like naming your favorite 3 kids when you don't even have kids, but please share memorable music. Well, the first one probably the one that I'm going to think about most often without trying to remember this weekend, and apologies because I'm going to get some names wrong or certainly Facebook or UMGF handles wrong. Danielle, is it Redbird, Dick Boak's friend?
Yep, Redbird and Raven.
She was singing, I want to say it was after we got there, I heard the end of one song and then the next one was Born on the Bayou, but it was something before that. So it's so memorable I can't remember the title of it, but
Holy smokes.
Her voice was so loud that some people told me the next day they wanted to listen to her longer, but, and I quote, it was too loud. Like, it was so great. It was so powerful. You couldn't take it. And we mean that with love when I say that. But
yeah, she is a force. So she's got an internet presence. You can find her on Facebook. She performs as Redbird and Raven with her partner, Chrissy. And yes, they were that first real night for me, Friday night after dinner in one of the common rooms. We had small common rooms for song circles, and then across from that is a large sort of banquet room called the Lehigh Room, and that was used for a variety of different purposes and little song circles and different parts. But we had a very special event where Dick Boak retired from Martin and went back to making his own guitars in his retirement, and he's made a bunch of them, and he had them there. And we're talking about guitars made with very special wood, like this amazing orange Brazilian rosewood on a dreadnought, but also these guitars he makes out of spruce with spruce backs and sides, and he calls his spruce geese. And so I walk in, and there she is, just holding court with his enormous voice that's a cross between Janis Joplin, Rod Stewart, John Fogerty, say Born on the Bayou, just this magnificent singing voice. And she's been friends with Dick Boak for some time, and in fact she helped him set up the guitars and all that sort of stuff. And there's Maury playing with them, and I grab a guitar and I sit down and play along with him for a little bit before I go over to talk to Dick. But yes, indeed. And she also performed at the Martin on Main performances that happens on Saturday as part of the big street fair. And so that was really great. That's really great. So Redbird, one of everybody's big memories, but one of Maury's big memories. So my first one I said was seeing Green Dots and second-year people transition from playing not playing in front of people, being too bashful to play in front of people, to apologizing in advance for their first song circle performance, to eagerly sharing a favorite song or original composition because of all the positive reinforcement they had received, all within a 2 or 3 day period. I saw people go through this, and I've seen them doing year after year after year, but this was particularly special. I mentioned John, who was somebody who was very hesitant to play, felt like an interloper. And he left knowing he's one of us, even though he was only there for a day and a night and then showed up, to watch the performances on Saturday. He's one of us. Next year, he's going to rent a room and he'll be there for the entire thing. And then also Lee and Rosanna from England, who many of you know if you've been on these podcasts and Martin versus Martin performances and that. Lee and Rosanna have big fans of Maury's online presence for a while now, and I'm proud to say my fans too now. And they came over, and they neither of them had been to the United States before, and we met in the hospitality room that we have where all the snacks are laid out on Friday, and then got to know them better and better as the time went by. And Lee was again one of those kind of people who had to apologize for not playing very well and knowing very much and all this stuff. By the end of the last night, he had stopped doing that entirely and was just inspired to play this one or play that one. And it was I'm just so happy to see the metamorphosis of the newcomers and who are now eager to come back next year. And are already probably thinking of the songs they want to do at the open mic because they weren't brave enough to do the open mic this year, but are going to do it next year. So that was one. And then I have to say, I'll just say this right now, I said getting to share the Martin on Main stage with Maury Rutch. After only 21 years of Martinfest, we finally did Martin on Main together as a duo, and that was a great time. And at the open mic on Friday, we tried the two songs we knew the least, at least that one of us knew the least, and that went over big. And this is not part of my regrets, but I regret the fact that I stayed up on Friday night singing my lungs out. So by Saturday, my voice was really ragged and got raggeder and raggeder as the weekend went on. But normally I don't sing on Friday if I'm going to sing on Saturday at Martin on Main, but I was having too much fun. So that was great. We did. We opened with Maury's song October, which I've always loved, and
thank you.
And then we did my song twice that a lot of people liked, and so I sang with him and he sang with me, and we each played a little bit of lead guitar. And then we did David Crosby's The Lee Shore as a memorial to David Crosby and David Lindley, who used to play it together when Lindley was in the Crosby and Nash touring band in the 1970s. And then we did Jackson Brown's Your Bright Baby Blues, which I've always loved Maury's rendition of, so I got to sing and play on that. But it was so horribly humid that I went to slide up into a chord, and it would just ground into the fretboard, and so it was, there was a lot of that going on, not just us. It was Saturday was super humid and hot and pretty sticky stuff. But and then I'll just jump ahead. My last memorable music memory, my extra night. A couple of people that I admire greatly were staying over. Mark Prasar from Virginia, and he's from New York City originally, and Bill Nadella from Michigan, who goes by Willie Sunday. And I got to be in a 4-person with the guy that I was rooming with, Kirby Stadler, and 4-person song circle that night. And wow. Mark Prasar is an American treasure. He was in a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship apprentice to one of the great African American bluesmen, John Cephas, Bowling Green John Cephas, who's no longer with us, but he was his apprentice. And he has spent his life playing very traditional American blues, the music of John Lee Hooker, those kind of people, and of course Cephas. So that was wonderful to hear him doing Stagger Lee and all these old traditional blues things that go back to the early 20th century. Bill Nandella is a wonderful troubadour who collects and shares American and Canadian songwriting tradition. Everybody from Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark to more traditional people, but on up into Bruce Coburn, Tom Waits, Graham Parsons, anybody who writes those great songs about interesting characters from the fabric of American life, and to be able to just watch the two of them do song after song after song, with Kirby and I also, taking our turns. That was special. So those are my three. Do you have other music memories you want to pop out?
I do, and I'll speak for them. I bet you if they were on this podcast, they would say that they heard some great stuff from you and Kirby, too. So don't think for a minute you're just going to tell us you listened to some great music the extra night. I'm sure you were part of the reason that there was extra music happening, but because I've seen those song circles from a distance and up close, and I'm sure they'd feel the same about you. I don't want to leave this podcast without telling you that some other memorable music for me was some John Martin stuff done by Lee. He, again, you said a lot of his earlier Friday night stuff was, I'm going to mess this up, don't listen. And he wasn't out of his shell in the beginning. But when he did collect himself enough to play, even though he would try to tell you that there were too many mistakes to be proud of, he has such a great, his voice is like water. I don't know how to describe it, but he's so mellow, and I'm reaching for the wrong words, but watching him play folk stuff, no matter whose guitar it was just so neat, and a lot of it has strange tunings. I'll go on record to say I bet he's the only guy at Martinfest 2023 that tuned one of his guitars to D-A-D-D-A-D, and that was a running joke for at least 4.5 hours. At one point we said, if you can convince 3 people that come in that door to tune their guitar to that, I'll buy you something to drink. And he gave up after too long, but it was interesting stuff. And we're probably a half hour into this program, and we're burying the lead. Roeth, I want to say that I met him at NASFest, but the truth is I got to meet Roeth, many months before, very, very briefly at Martin. It was one of those things where he was going to take a tour, and during some of the live streams that I host on YouTube, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, the subject came up. At the time, some people would say, I'm going to be at Martin. Would you let me know when you're going to be in town? I actually said to Roeth, let me know when you're going to be there. I have to be there at least once a week. If you want to, it'd be a thrill to get to meet you, even if it's just for a few minutes. And we did. He said, listen, it's going to be on a Tuesday this week. Will you be around? So I ended up making my week, moving it around so that was the day I went there. We only spent maybe 10 minutes together. He was taking a tour and looking at the museum. So we, exchanged pleasantries and got to know each other very, very quickly. He played a couple songs on some guitars in the lobby, but that was it. That's all we really got to do. So I didn't know Roeth, but I had put a name with a face, more so than anyone else. So hearing him play your music with you in the room, at times playing it for you, at times playing it and you're playing along with him. It was just, I think it's very corny for me to say that it looked like a proud papa watching somebody aspire to do your music is something that probably happened months ago. This weekend, he played your music, and the joke began, do we even need Spoon here anymore? We've got the next generation right there. And I'm saying that with tongue in cheek for sure. But
I told him, I'm going to bequeath him my green sweater. If my football injuries get so bad that I can't do the reviews, for one man's guitar and Maury's music is going to get pulled in. He'll have to start coming down to Nazareth and playing the Martins. But,
one of our friends, David Belcher, said, it's only because he can't do 20 questions as well as Spoon. The Spoon still has a job, but it was really. It was really awesome for me, and you mentioned a minute ago that, maybe one of many reasons some of these guys made the trip to Martinfest was because I won't shut up about it on all of my live streams. If I'm not talking about Lost and Haunted Ways, I'm talking about Martinfest, and it's just because I love that stuff. To see them, first of all, show up Secondly, show up and be happy that they're there, and then see them flourish the way they did. Everybody that made their first trip, but it was Roeth playing the Spoon music has to be into my memorable music part of this show, and I couldn't let it go.
Well, yeah, I had mentioned in general seeing the green dots and second people do this. Of course, he's part of that. I was saving him for my poignant moments because it was an extremely poignant moment to see him play my compositions and to, and just to hear, his appreciation of my music. But also, I knew he was a great guy to begin with, of course, because he likes my music. But no, I knew he was a great guy. But what a great guy! We had such a great time, and to see him having such a great time, see him like it was like Disneyland and Christmas wrapped up together, and that happens to a variety of people. I can name multiple people who are now Martinfest veterans who don't always get to come here. Some of them weren't, but their first Martinfest were like that too. It was like they found a tribe they didn't even know existed and became a part of. And Roeth's going to be one of those guys that, if he possibly can, life gives us all curveballs, he'll be there next year, and he will, be another disciple, Martinfest disciple, telling people how great it is, even though it's impossible for them to truly understand if they're not there, and the kind of bonding that goes on. But yes, it was great. It was great. It was great for him to see him again by the end of the weekend. He sang. I didn't know he sang. He sang a song on Sunday night in the song circle. A song circle with some pretty heavy hitters, and it just came out. That was awesome. So that was yeah. Big thumbs up for Lee from Cornwall and Roeth from northeast Ohio. Wonderful stuff.
Well, where has the time gone, Spoon?
Yeah, no kidding. We talked about how fast time goes by when you're at Martinfest. It goes by fast when you're talking about Martinfest and reliving it.
I think we might have to do the prudent thing here, take a break and split this up into 2 episodes. Would you guys forgive us if we ask you to come back and watch Martinfest Recap Part 2?
Oh, I think that would be fine. They can listen to 1, go get a sandwich, or listen to Part 2 whenever they want later on.
Hang tight. We're going to circle the wagons and come back with the thrilling conclusion of Martinfest 2023 Part 2 from all of us at Maury's Music. Thanks for starting to listen.
Hear you later.
This has been a presentation of Maury's Music, your trusted source for Martin and Blue Ridge guitars. Find us online at maurysmusic.com.